Hi, I'm Mike Coe, CNBC contributor, and I also have the Open Interest YouTube channel. I'm not a camera operator, not an audiovisual expert. I spend more of my time as a byproduct of my work analyzing financial markets on this side of the camera than on the other side. And because of that, I was looking for a camera that could be controlled remotely to simplify our workflow. My hope had been that we'd be able to find a camera that people who are not operating at this location would be able to control the camera, control things like exposure, control white balance, and maybe even things like focus and zoom, things like that, remotely. Additionally, I was looking for a camera that didn't have to have a lot of extra peripherals, cables, didn't need to be connected to encoders and decoders to get a signal across to wherever it is that I wanted it to go. And for that reason, I invested in this camera recently, which is a Blackmagic Studio 6K Pro. The idea had been that just plug a microphone into it. It has talkback. It has just a handful of controls. It's got a monitor built in. You can actually just plug it directly into an Ethernet jack and even get power over Ethernet. So it seemed like a really simple solution. To put things in perspective, the solution that I'm using right now, I'm using a Sony a7S III. That Sony a7S III then runs to a Blackmagic ATEM Mini Extreme switcher. That in turn can go to a couple encoders. So depending on whether we're trying to send something via SRT or some other means, it can also just connect to the computer so that it can be used as the computer's camera, and then use it for everything from WebEx, Skype, Zoom, Slack, and so on. So this seemed like the perfect solution because all I would need to do is have a microphone, have the camera, and essentially plug it into the internet, let somebody else deal with the problem. And so I was very excited to get this. The other thing I would say about it is that this camera uses a Canon EF mount. And the reason that was relevant for me in particular was because it just so happened that we had, my wife had a Canon stills camera that uses EF lenses. So that seemed like a decent solution. Things have not turned out so great though. So this camera is actually going to be shipped back to B&H, which is where I got that and basically is where I buy most of the equipment that I use. And the reason for that is the camera, straight out of camera, has a pronounced greenish yellow tint. It also tends to just underexpose. These are things that you can resolve. But the issue is that because in my workflow it's always live, and I don't have an opportunity to do color grading or anything like that after the fact. It's just going straight out to either to YouTube or to CNBC. The fact that the camera has such a pronounced tint straight out of camera is a bit of a problem, and I thought I would demonstrate that. So you can sort of see what the image looks like right now. This is, as I pointed out, a Sony a7S III, and let me just describe the other cameras that I have here. So the Sony a7S III, the Studio 6K from Blackmagic. I have back here a camcorder. That's a Sony PXW Z150. I've had that for 7 years. Use it mostly for filming my kids' sports. My wife's Canon a 7D Mark II, which is really just a stills camera, also 7 or 8 years old. And then up here is my stills camera, which is a Sony a7 IV. All of the cameras that we have here were auto white balanced for this exercise. So we're essentially seeing this is what the cameras think the settings should be. Now, the room has some funny lighting going on, and I figured I would just quickly describe what that is. This is an office. It's about 200 square feet. It has warm fluorescent lights, which are horrible, of course, overhead, and they will tend to introduce a bit of a green on their own. I do have some additional lights in front of me. So I have Intellitech lights as sort of the key light, and Felix is providing the fill light down here. These are adjustable. They are running at 3250 Kelvin in terms of color temperature, which also happens to be pretty close to what these fluorescent lights generate. And as it happens, when this was set to auto white balance, it set the camera to 3300 Kelvin, and it automatically set the tint to 10. For those that don't know, this camera, it has a tint setting that can run from -50 to +50. -50 is all the way green, +50 is all the way magenta. So this is actually making an adjustment to make this look less green, but still that's what we're getting. And these cameras were also automatically white balanced. So let's just take a quick peek at how these things end up looking. So the image that you're seeing right now, this is the Sony PXW Z150. This next one here, I apologize, this one's zoomed out a little bit more, and you'll also notice the focus is not so great. This is the Canon 7D Mark II. Again, this is not a video camera, it's a stills camera. It does take pretty good still pictures, I have to say. So I'm pretty happy with that camera. This is the Sony A7 IV. And this is the Blackmagic Studio 6K. So a couple quick things about this image. It might be a little bit hard to make out, but if you were able to take a look at these images on that Calibrate card, it would probably help illustrate the point. I apologize for the camera shaking. I'm just going to tilt this up just a touch so we can get a slightly closer picture on that. And I'll zoom in just a bit. So first things first, I just happen to notice that the camera tends to expose very dark. That's something that one can adjust. I can actually take that up, and in fact I will do so right now by taking up the gain a little. There we go. So again, I'm now running this auto white balance. I took the gain up. But I just don't think this image looks that great out of the camera, frankly. Now, I'll admit that this image, which is coming straight out of the A7S III, is a pretty saturated Kodachromy type of image. Again, I'm no expert on these things, but it is pretty vibrant. The colors that we have here are fairly true to life. So when I compare, for example, what I see with my own eye on this mouse and this more matte colored one here, these images all look pretty good. But I have to say, I'm just not enamored at all of what this image looks like. And this is arguably the best possible light. Now, why is that? Because it shouldn't be green really at all. This section of the room is getting very little of the fluorescent light that is directly over my head right now. And all of those other cameras are essentially getting the same light. And why is that? Because I have these studio lights that are facing in this direction. I have these overhead warm fluorescent lights. But directly over that chair, the ceiling in that section of the room is taller than it is here. So it's about 9 feet here, 12 feet there. There's a skylight. And so that's getting light from outside. That's the reason you get that bluish tint in that section of the room. But yeah, I'm just a little bit disappointed because I have to say that in terms of the form factor, this camera just couldn't be any easier. All the connections are right there. There's only a handful of controls. There's a power button, there's a program and 3 function buttons, 4 knobs, and then everything is touchscreen. And it's really intuitive for non-experts like myself. If I want to adjust the exposure higher or lower, there's a simple gain button. Everything is really easy and intuitive on this camera. So I was really excited to use this because I thought for anybody like me who doesn't really know anything about cameras, it would be great. Just set the thing on a tripod, white balance it, plug it into the internet, get your talk back straight out of this thing, microphone goes into it, and you're good to go. Much less equipment to deal with. Perfect. But at the end of the day, the most important thing for a camera is going to be the image. We'll put up with a lot to get a better looking image, especially if you're like me, you have a face for radio. We need all the help we can get. We don't want a camera to make us look like the Incredible Hulk. So that's all I have. I hope that people who might be considering this camera find it helpful. I did contact Blackmagic support, by the way. They agreed. I sent them some stills from the camera, and they said that this was an issue that may end up getting resolved in firmware. But may get resolved in firmware does not help somebody who needs to use the camera straight away. So for now, I guess I'm still going to be using a pile of devices, including the A7S III that you're watching right now.